Viewers, brace yourselves, because what I'm about to tell you will flip the entire King Von narrative upside down. For years, the streets whispered about Von's enemies, the young boy rivalry, and the night his life was stolen. But what if I told you the most chilling betrayal didn't come from outsiders, but from the people closest to him? Eyes. Picture this. King Von survives the first wave of bullets. He's hurt, but he's breathing. The ops didn't finish the job, because the ops weren't strangers at all. Word on the street? His own sister, Kayla B, pulled the trigger first. Let that sink in. The one person the world thought would ride for him may have set the trap. And it doesn't stop there. Von's final hours in the hospital weren't just a tragedy. They were a conspiracy. Rumors say when Kayla feared Von might wake up and spill everything, she made the most dangerous call of her life, straight to Lil Durk. And what happened next? Let's just say it wasn't the doctors who made sure Von never walked out of that hospital alive. Broken heart. So buckle up. This story is darker, bloodier, and more twisted than anything you've heard before. The story of King Von's downfall doesn't start the night he took his last breath. It starts way before, buried under layers of jealousy, betrayal, and family secrets that nobody saw coming. People love to talk about Von as a soldier in the rap game, a man who carried the streets of Chicago on his back, and someone who wasn't afraid to face enemies head-on. But what if the real danger was never the ops outside? What if the knife in his back was already being sharpened inside his own circle? That's the part nobody wanted to admit, and that's exactly why the story hits so hard. Back in 2020, the headlines were full of one thing: King Von versus NBA Youngboy. Their beef wasn't just two rappers throwing subliminals. It was raw, personal, and messy. Von didn't like Youngboy, not one bit. He didn't respect him, didn't vibe with him, and made it known. But what fans didn't know was how deep the wound really went. Because in the middle of that beef stood someone unexpected: Von's own blood, his sister, Kayla B. Rumors started swirling when Kayla was allegedly caught spending time with NBA Youngboy. Not just a quick link-up, not just an innocent hangout, but a whole night. And in the streets, that's not something you can just sweep under the rug. Imagine being Von, watching your own sister cozy up with your enemy. That's not just betrayal, that's war inside the family. And Von? He was the type to keep it real no matter who got burned. People close to him say he was seconds away from blasting the truth, ready to expose Kayla and destroy whatever image she was trying to protect. That's when the paranoia set in. Kayla wasn't just worried about her reputation. She was terrified. She knew that if Von aired out the truth, not only would the streets turn against her, but her loyalty to her brother would be questioned forever. And in the world they lived in, that wasn't just embarrassing, it was dangerous. So the whispers began. Kayla didn't just fear Von's honesty, she started fearing Von himself. Fast forward to the night of the attack. Everyone remembers the chaos. Shots rang out, Von was hit, the crowd scattered, and for a moment it felt like just another tragic chapter in the endless cycle of street violence. But rewind the tape and look closer. The talk is that the first bullet didn't come from some faceless enemy or a random op. It came from someone Von never expected, his sister. That's the gut punch nobody wanted to believe. That's the whisper people were too scared to say out loud. Von was down, bleeding, but alive. The streets assumed it was the usual drama, ops catching him slipping. But behind the curtain, the betrayal ran deeper. Kayla had allegedly pulled the trigger herself, setting up her own brother before anyone else even had a chance. And the craziest part? Nobody suspected her in that moment. She was the grieving sister in public, but behind closed doors, panic was eating her alive. As Von was rushed to the hospital, the city held its breath. Fans prayed, blogs exploded, and his enemies waited for news. But inside that hospital room, the story wasn't just about life and death. It was about secrets. Von was still breathing. And that alone was Kayla's worst nightmare. Because if Von opened his mouth, if he even whispered the truth about who shot him, everything would crumble. She wasn't just fighting to keep him alive. She was praying he never spoke again. Think about that for a second. The world saw a victim, but in Kayla's eyes, Von was a ticking time bomb. Every breath he took was a countdown to her exposure. And when word reached her that Von might survive, her panic turned into desperation. That's when she made the call, the one decision that changed everything. Instead of protecting her brother, instead of hoping for his recovery, She reached out to the one person she thought could help bury the truth forever, Lil Durk. Now here's where it gets even darker. At that time, fans thought Durk was Von's closest ally, his ride or die, the man who was supposed to carry the flag after him. But behind the smoke and mirrors, alliances in this game are never clean. Kayla reached out, and according to whispers, Durk didn't hesitate. He understood the stakes. If Von lived, everything Kayla feared would come crashing down, and with it, Durk's carefully built empire might start to crack too. Von lying in that hospital bed wasn't just a brother fighting for life. He was a secret waiting to escape. And to people who had built their reputations on silence, that was too big of a risk. The hospital wasn't just a place of healing that night. It became a battlefield, one where betrayal wore the mask of family and loyalty. While fans waited outside, crying and hoping for good news, the real story was unfolding inside. Kayla's hands were already stained, but she couldn't finish what she started. She needed someone colder, someone willing to cross the line without hesitation. That's why Durk entered the picture. The whispers say he walked into that hospital not as a friend, not as a brother in arms, but as the final executioner. Von was alive, and that was the problem. Kayla's fear became Durk's weapon, and together they set the stage for the unthinkable. It wasn't about ops anymore. It wasn't about street beef. It was about silencing the one person who could expose them both. And that right there is where the story of betrayal turns from shocking to chilling. Because in the end, the real question isn't who pulled the trigger in the street. It's who made sure Von never walked out of that hospital alive. The hospital was supposed to be a safe place. That's where families gather, where prayers are whispered, and where second chances are handed out. But for King Von, that hospital bed turned into the most dangerous trap of his life. While fans outside were chanting his name and waiting for updates, inside the walls, the people he trusted the most were already plotting his silence. Von was weak, but alive. His breathing was shallow, his body was broken, but the fight in him wasn't gone yet. And that was the problem. Because every flicker of life inside him was another chance for him to reveal the truth, that the first shot didn't come from the ops, but from his own sister. Kayla wasn't just scared. She was terrified. The closer Von got to waking up, the closer her secrets came to spilling all over the world. So what does she do? She doesn't pray. She doesn't hope. She doesn't wait for her brother to recover. She picks up her phone and calls the one man who had both the power and the motive to finish what she couldn't, Lil Durk. Now, let's pause for a second. To the outside world, Durk was Von's brother in arms. The ride or die who shouted his name, featured him in music, and carried him like family. But loyalty in hip-hop has always been a slippery game. Behind the scenes, whispers had always painted Durk as a strategist, someone who understood that survival in this industry wasn't just about making hits, it was about cutting threats before they cut you. So when Kayla's call came in, it wasn't just a sister begging for help. It was a business proposition. Von's survival meant exposure, and exposure meant downfall, not just for Kayla, but for everyone connected to her, including Durk. And for someone who had built his empire on keeping his image spotless, that was unacceptable. When Lil Durk arrived at the hospital, he didn't walk in like a grieving brother. He didn't cry or break down like the fans outside. He walked in with a mission. And according to the whispers, he wasn't carrying flowers or prayers, he was carrying resolve. Kayla had already crossed the line, and now it was Durk's turn to finish the job. Von was lying there, fighting for his life. Nurses checked monitors, doctors moved quickly, and for a moment it looked like maybe, just maybe, he would make it out. But Kayla's paranoia had already poisoned the room. She hovered close, her eyes darting, her nerves on edge. Every beep from the machines was another reminder that the truth was seconds away. That's when Durk allegedly made his move. Not loud, not chaotic, quiet. Whispers say it wasn't gunfire this time. It wasn't the street chaos Von was used to. It was something colder, something more surgical. A knife. Durk allegedly slipped past the chaos, into Von's room, and turned that hospital bed into the final crime scene. The details are chilling. Stories claim he didn't just stab Von, he made sure the damage was permanent. Cuts to the organs, the kind of wounds you don't come back from. And just like that, the hope that Von might recover was gone. The doctors could fight all they wanted, but the fight had already been stolen from him. Imagine the betrayal. Von fought his way out of the streets. He battled ops, dodged bullets, carried scars, and walked with enemies lurking around every corner. But the final blow didn't come from the streets. It came from family. It came from a man he called brother. It came from the people who should have been protecting him when he was at his weakest. Outside the hospital, fans kept refreshing their phones, waiting for someone to say Vaughn was pulling through. They didn't know that inside, the script had already been rewritten. Kayla and Durk weren't hoping for survival. They were making sure survival never happened. And that's the part that makes this story so twisted. Vaughn wasn't just killed by violence. He was killed by betrayal, by silence, and by the ones who should have been praying for his recovery. His sister, who pulled the trigger first. His friend, who allegedly stabbed him last. Two people who should have carried him turned into the ones who buried him. The aftermath in that hospital room was chaos. Nurses panicked. Doctors scrambled. Machines screamed. But the damage was already irreversible. And in the middle of it all, Kayla and Durk? They walked away without a scratch. To the world outside, they were grieving allies, crying for a fallen brother. But behind closed doors, they were the architects of the very tragedy they pretended to mourn. Think about the image. Lil Durk posting tributes, Kayla crying crocodile tears, fans rallying behind them as if they were the ones who lost everything. When in reality, the whispers say they weren't just victims of Vaughn's death, they were the masterminds. And that's where the conspiracy deepens. Because when you look at the timeline, the contradictions, and the silence, the pieces start to fit too perfectly. Vaughn didn't just die. He was silenced. His story wasn't ended by fate. It was erased by betrayal. That's the kind of truth the streets don't want to talk about. It's the kind of story that gets buried under headlines, drowned out by tributes, and silenced by those who profit from the lie. But if you dig deep enough, the betrayal screams louder than the mourning. And the question that still hangs in the air is simple. If Vaughn was truly silenced by his sister and his friend, how long can the truth stay buried before it explodes? The news broke like wildfire. King Vaughn was gone. Fans cried in the streets, blogs exploded with tributes, and social media drowned in hashtags. To the public, it was just another heartbreaking loss in hip-hop, another young king taken too soon. But behind the candlelight vigils and RIP posts, a darker story was simmering. Because while the world mourned, the whispers about what really happened in that hospital began to leak. At first, nobody wanted to believe it. How could Kayla B., Vaughn's own sister, be tied to the attack? How could Lil Durk, the man who called Vaughn his brother, be linked to the final betrayal? It sounded too twisted, too cruel to be true. But the streets don't stay quiet forever. People started asking questions, and the answers didn't add up. For starters, Vaughn didn't die instantly. That's something the reports couldn't hide. He was alive long enough to reach the hospital. That alone raised eyebrows. If he was breathing, if doctors were working on him, what exactly happened behind those walls that ended his fight so suddenly? It wasn't the first time hospitals in hip-hop stories became crime scenes. But this time, the suspects weren't outsiders, they were insiders. Then came the leaks. Screenshots, whispers, and supposed insider DMs started floating online. Anonymous accounts claimed Kayla had been seen shaking when she got the call that Vaughn was still alive. Others swore that Durk's sudden appearance at the hospital wasn't a coincidence, but a mission. The timing was too perfect, too suspicious. And in a culture built on receipts, the lack of clarity only fueled the fire. Fans split into two camps. On one side were the loyalists, the ones who refused to believe Kayla or Durk could ever cross Vaughn. They defended them, posting tributes, saying it was all just hate from outsiders. But on the other side were the skeptics, the ones connecting dots nobody wanted to see. Why was Kayla so defensive on social media? Why did Durk stay silent about the details? And why did Vaughn's last hours look more like a cover-up than a tragedy? Industry voices started chiming in too. Some rappers dropped cryptic tweets about betrayal, others posted "Watch Who You Trust" captions that fans immediately linked to Vaughn's death. Even bloggers who usually stayed away from conspiracies couldn't ignore the noise. Something about the story didn't sit right. Too many gaps. Too much silence. And then the most haunting detail of all, Vaughn's unfinished music. Before his death, he had tracks, verses, and notes that insiders claimed hinted at betrayal in his circle. Lines about snakes, about enemies close to home, about secrets that could tear everything apart. Fans dug into those lyrics like detectives, pulling out every bar that could possibly connect to Kayla or Durk. Suddenly, Von's music felt less like art and more like prophecy. Kayla, meanwhile, tried to play the grieving sister role. Public tears, emotional posts, tributes that painted her as broken. But every time she appeared online, the comments flooded with accusations. People weren't buying it. You cried too late. Why you so defensive? If Von was alive at the hospital, what really happened? The pressure was suffocating, and the more she denied, the louder the whispers grew. Durk played it differently. He went ice cold. No explanations, no breakdowns, just silence and a carefully curated image. To some fans, that looked like loyalty, a man mourning privately. But to others, it was the silence of guilt. Because if you had nothing to hide, why not clear the air? Why not speak up for the friend you claimed was your brother? The longer the silence stretched, the more the conspiracy grew. Fake audio clips started dropping, alleged phone calls between Kayla and Durk, whispers about what happened in that hospital room. Most of it was impossible to verify, but the damage was done. Once the idea was planted, people couldn't unsee it. And in hip-hop, perception is often more powerful than truth. Von's death became more than a tragedy. It became a story about betrayal, loyalty, and the darkest side of family. Fans stopped asking who shot Von, and started asking who wanted him silent. And that's the kind of shift that leaves scars on an entire culture. Years from now, people will still argue about what happened that night. Was it just street violence catching up to Von? Or was it a carefully orchestrated betrayal from the inside? Was Kayla really the second shooter? And was Durk truly the one who made sure Von never left the hospital alive? The answers may never be confirmed, but the whispers will never die. Because in the end, Von didn't just lose his life. He lost it to the one thing no soldier can survive: betrayal from within. And maybe that's the lesson buried under all the rumors and leaks. In the streets, you can see your enemies coming. But the real danger? It's the one sitting next to you, smiling while they sharpen the knife. So here we are. King Von, gone too soon. His fans still screaming his name, his music still blasting through speakers, his legacy still alive. But behind the legacy is a shadow, a mystery that refuses to fade. Was his sister the hand that pulled the trigger? Was his friend the one who ended it all? Or is the truth even darker than anyone dares to imagine? The only thing certain is this: the story isn't finished. Not in the hearts of his fans, not in the whispers on the streets, and not in the culture that will forever debate how a rising king was silenced in the prime of his life. And if the truth ever does come out, it won't just shake the streets. It will burn the entire hip-hop world to the ground. Ladies and gentlemen, you've heard the story, the shocking betrayal, the whispers in the hospital, the allegations that turned family into enemies and friends into executioners. King Von's death wasn't just another headline. It became a mystery soaked in blood, secrets, and silence. And tonight, we've peeled back the layers that so many have been too afraid to touch. But here's the question only you can answer. Was this just another tragic chapter in the endless hip-hop war? Or was it the ultimate inside job? Did Kayla really pull the trigger on her own brother? Did Lil Durk finish what she started in that hospital room? Or is this just another smokescreen to hide something even bigger? Think about it. Von's music warned us. The timelines don't add up, and the silence from those closest to him screams louder than any diss track ever could. But we're not here to tell you what to believe. We're here to give you the story that nobody else will dare to say out loud. And now, it's your turn. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think this betrayal theory holds weight? Or are the streets just spinning another legend? Either way, the conversation is far from over, and we'll be here digging, exposing, and breaking down every hidden angle until the truth finally bursts out. This is Spillover, and we don't just report the headlines, we burn through the lies. Subscribe, share this video with your crew, and keep your eyes locked, because the next bombshell is already loading.